proceed with the roll call.
Mr. Nader?
Here.
Mr. Moss? Mr. Johnson?
Here.
Mr. Ricucci?
Here.
Mr. Denayo? Mr. Sevison?
Here.
Mr. Gray?
Here. We will now hear from the planning director. However, seeing either Paul or Michael here, who will you, Crystal?
Crystal Jacobson with Planning Services Division, and I'm filling in for Paul today. I have nothing to report except that there will be no Planning Commission hearings in the month of November. So your next scheduled hearing will be on December 12th.
Thank you. Now, I'm going to open up the meeting to any public comments that anyone here would like to make on any items not on the agenda. Do we see or hear anyone? No? Then we'll...
It's on. Okay. Ann Nichols, North Tahoe Preservation Alliance. For the record, I've got some additional comments on the Martis Valley West project application, specifically that the application fails to identify the Tahoe Rim Trail and its impact with the project. And I read the comments by the recreation planning person, and he didn't mention those either. And according to the map of the Rim Trail, the Rim Trail does cross the fiberboard freeway there and go up into this location. Also, the planning has, I guess you guys have decided to do a focused area plan with this project, which seems like piecemeal planning to me, because we've been working on the community plan update for over a year, and we've been asking for over a year about including development on the ridge in the considerations. And, the initial meeting with this project applicant was in September of last year, so you guys have known this was coming down the pike, I guess. So it just seems to make more sense if the community really is going to have input that this would be included. When I asked Michael Johnson about why we're not considering this, he didn't have a good answer. He said, that I was correct, that it probably should. I have that email I can include with this. So anyway, that's my comments. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ellie Waller, Tahoe Vista resident. I'd also like to echo Ms. Nichols' comments. I'm part of the North Tahoe West Community Plan Team where this ridge is and the fiberboard freeway. And during our planning sessions, we did ask about the ridge. And at that time, we weren't looking at those types of activities. We were just looking at the commercial core. And I'll have further comments after Crystal's presentation today. I've walked the site. I think as this project gets closer to approval or contention of approval, you all should go see this site. I think the applicant should take the Board of Supervisors as well as the Planning Commission to the site, do the walk that I did with the league, the applicant, a couple other conservation groups. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else caring to comment on any items not on today's agenda? Okay, seeing none, then I'll close that portion and open to our first agenda item, which is a subdivision modification and variance. Okay, Alan, if you'll enlighten us.
Good morning. Thanks for coming up to Tahoe. You guys picked a great day. I know when we did the Homewood project, it was snowing like crazy, but today's a good day. My name is Alan Bruce. I'm the project planner for the first item, which is a map modification for the Stafford residence. It's at the Fulton Acres number 3 subdivision. To get you oriented where it's located, it is in the Tahoe Basin. It's just south of Carnelian Bay, north of Tahoe City. The site location, this particular development was created in 1958. It is developed with single-family residences, garages, and decks. Highlighted in the red is the project site. The zoning around the area is Cedar Flats residential, Plan Area Statement 014. The project site, there is an existing 1.5-story residence that's located at the particular location. The site is pretty steep in the back, about a 30% slope. The applicant approached staff and decided to propose a 2-car garage with a deck above initially. And after reviewing it, looking at locations, we determined, and as well as a field inspection with a neighbor, we went ahead and had the redesign of the project for no deck above and to allow for storage in a one-vehicle car garage. The application is looking for a 0-foot setback for the map modification. This is the 20-foot setback for the map. The applicant is looking for about 330 square feet of storage in one-car garage with, again, no deck above. This is the rendering that came in with the garage as well as the storage and a flat roof above. And this is a rendering of it. And again, I do want to indicate, I do have the neighbor here too. He presented a letter to the commission making sure that the deck is not there, and that's what ultimately came with the application that you see before you today. So staff is looking for having the commission approve the project, determined categorically exempt per section 18.3605 and 070, as well as the findings and the conditions of approval within the staff report. There is a easement on the south side of this particular project for Liberty's Energy. It's a guy wire easement. There is an encroachment within that. There is conditions of approval that reflect that we have to get that approval for the building permit application. There was some discussion after the staff report went out. There is a telephone utility potentially that could be there as well. So we would modify as a recommendation to the commission to add that also to have the telephone company to allow that encroachment within that easement. And I'm here for any questions, and I do have the applicant, Ken Anderson, who's here to answer any questions on the application as well as the neighbor.
Would the applicant like to make any statement?
Good morning. I'm Ken Anderson. I'm here on behalf of the applicant and to answer any questions, concerns.
Could you explain just a little more about the easements that will need to be modified?
There is an anchor easement on the south corner for Liberty Utilities. We approached Rick Madrid at Liberty Utilities, and he said that they didn't want to abandon, but they were okay with our encroachment.
And you have a letter in file, I believe, on to that effect.
Yes, we do.
And the telephone company?
That's a new one. I wasn't aware of that, but I'm perfectly willing to go approach the phone company and find out what they need and if they'd be willing to approve that. As of right now, we're fine with all the conditions of approval that Alan put forward.
Anyone on the board, questions? No. Thank you. In that case, we'll open it up to any public comment.
Thank you.
My name is Tanya Canino, and we own the house next door. We don't really have a problem with the garage and everything. I just submitted the letter with my initial concerns to the project because there is a variance on the other side where they built a garage, and then now there's a garage being built on at the Stafford place too. So our property's kind of squished with variance garages, and I just want to submit the letter to make sure that if these properties get sold in the future and somebody wants to build another deck or an addition, we're already squished, and I just wanted to have it for the record. So I don't have a problem with what's being proposed right now.
Thank you. Anyone else? Seeing no one else, I'll close this part of the public comment and bring it back to the commission. Any questions from anyone?
I'd like to ask Alan a quick question here. I saw her letter, and I was actually, before I saw this letter, how many other properties, when I saw zero a variance to eliminate that completely, at least for the portion of the garage, how many more along this street are in this condition? Because that seems kind of severe unless it's a common practice in this subdivision or in this kind of terrain.
Right. There is in the staff report, there's 3 other properties we did identify, 820, 940 Carnelian Circle, as well as 840 Carnelian Circle. There was an entryway feature. There had to be special findings for this to allow that because of the steep terrain, and staff did identify there was others in the neighborhood that had this encroachment into the 20-foot map setback.
Thank you.
Maybe I have a question, just to follow up on the Mrs. Canino's statement. Now, if somebody wants to modify the garage in the future, that it'll require another variance request?
Yeah, map modification, because the conditions are very specific of what's being approved at that location. And that's what was indicated to the neighbor too. Initially, when it came in with the deck, the applicant modified it. So we changed the application and the conditions of approval for the commission today.
Okay.
But yeah, if they were to change it, they'd have to come back to you.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Anyone else?
I might sort of point out, just for everyone's edification, that we do have a county ordinance that says if you have 20% fall in the first 20 feet of your lots, you can automatically get a variance, so you don't have to have a hearing or anything. The strange part about this one is the 20-foot steep terrain is in the back of the lot, so it forced the house to the street initially, so that left little room. So it's kind of the reverse situation. But it's my understanding, and I think I'm correct, that if any changes are proposed in the future, they'd have to come have a public comment and have an opportunity to voice your opinion at that time.
No more questions? Can I get a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'll move that we follow staff's recommendation and determine the project is categorically exempt pursuant to section 18.36.050, class 3. Alan?
Yeah, also condition number 3, to add the telephone, that'd be Pac Bell. Because of utilities, anchor easements, we got mentioned about the telephone company potentially being there. We just want to cover our bases. So that'd be condition 3, to also add a Pacific Bell.
Pac Bell, huh? Okay, I'll make that part of the approval. And then I think we should take it in 2 steps, I guess. We'll just do the exemption to start with, the findings. And then we'll do the subdivisions and variance later, I guess. Is that the way you like it?
Yeah, that's fine. And then just add to condition number 3 be modified so that it reads in the second sentence would be prior to any building permit issuance, the applicant shall provide the county an approval letter from Liberty Utilities and the telephone company for the portion of the easement.
Okay, we'll do that.
Make it so.
So,
Do I get a second on that?
What was the motion again?
Determine that the project
up
is
there.
categorically
Okay.
exempt pursuant to section 18.36050, pass 3, and then include the rest of the new construction and conversion and so forth. And then also condition 3, add Pac Bell and letters from Pac Bell and Liberty Electric to for the approval of the intrusion into the easement.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Mr. Stafford.
Then we'll further approve the subdivision modification and variance. PSM 2013-0232 to allow for 0 front setback where 20 foot is required in order to permit construction of a single-family garage with accessory storage attached to an existing single-family residence located at 820 Carnelian Circle, EPN 092-031-021, subject to the findings and conditions of approval contained in the staff report.
As modified.
as modified.
modified.
Yeah.
That's second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? No. Motion carries. Moving on to our second item on the agenda.
Yeah, Alan Bruce again, on behalf of Alex Fish, who was the project planner on this particular project. This is also a map modification. This one is in Alpine Meadows Estates. It's located in Alpine Meadows. The project location, it is residential single family. To the north is open space. The subdivision was in 1971. The applicant is proposing a 3.5-foot encroachment into the 20-foot setback for a deck, approximately 28 square feet. It has an existing home, and the encroachment will be the second-story deck. This is the existing conditions. Highlighted in the red is the proposed deck. There is a public utility easement also on this particular project. As part of the conditions of approval, there is abandonment of the utility easement at that portion where the deck is. This is the project at its finish elevations. And again, this is pretty straightforward. It's a map modification to the 20-foot setback, and staff is recommending approval to the commission.
Could you go back to the original pictures?
Yep.
Okay, would the applicant like to make any statement?
My name is Kevin Chappell. I'm with the Gary Davis Group here on behalf of the homeowner. I don't have any statements, but I can answer any questions you guys have.
That deck now will be right there on that view looking west, right along that side right there.
Correct. It's just the upper level deck,
Right.
extending basically to the end of the house.
Any other questions? Thank you. I'll open this now for public comment. Anybody wishing to be heard, please step forward. And seeing no one, I'll close the public comment part, bring it back to the commission. Any discussion? It's pretty straightforward. Well,
We have the staff recommends that the planning commission take the following action, and I'll make that a motion. Determine the project to be categorically exempt from sections 18.36030 and 18.36070, Class 1 existing facilities, and Class 5 minor alterations and land use limitations of the environmental review ordinance and CEQA guidelines.
we have a motion.
Second?
We have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Build the deck.
Next motion is to approve the subdivision modification and variance to allow for a 16-foot, 6-inch front setback measured from the front property line in order to allow construction of an addition to the existing second-story deck subject to the findings and conditions of approval contained in the staff report.
Second?
We have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Now, do I need to give them a date and time for appeals?
I think there's probably,
Does the applicant want the maps?
Is there
an appeal process for this?
for both of these guys?
Yes, there's already an appeal process, but the fact that nobody's here.
No one's,
Okay. Well, there is an appeal process, and it'll cost approximately $536, I believe. If anyone wishes to file an appeal within 10 days, you may.
On either one of these?
yes.
On both of
On
them?
both of them, yes. Okay, moving on.
Applicant want the maps? Plans?
Anybody?
It's a workshop.
I guess not. Oh, here he comes.
If you're in
Here. Street representative.
with a workshop, you don't have to worry about that.
Sometimes you need them to go to the planning commission, to the, if they go.
The workshop portion of this meeting is not scheduled for another 10 minutes, so I'm going to take a 5-minute recess, and then we'll reconvene. All right, ladies and gentlemen, if you'll please take your seats, we'll advance to the next part of the
Thanks
meeting.
for mentioning that about the ordinance. We're going to look into that.
Oh, yeah, we did that up from the valley with us.
Our 10:30 item is our Tahoe Basin Community Plan update. We'll be hearing from Ms. Crystal Jacobson. And you would be so happy to proceed.
Thank you. I first just want to tell you this is a long presentation, so bear with me, but I promise I'll get through it as quickly as I can. I've done it a lot, so this presentation, so I should be able to move through it pretty quickly. But I'm providing you with it's a public workshop today. So the item before you is a report on the county's efforts to update its community plans in the Tahoe Basin. So we're calling it the Tahoe Basin Community Plan Update. Just for some background, this process started in July 2011 when our board directed us to initiate an update of all 9 plans. As part of this process, we are consolidating those 9 plans into one overarching policy document and then 4 separate sub-planning areas within that, the greater boundary. The plan areas have been identified for the purpose of developing area plans. So those area plans will consist of the zoning, development standards, and design guidelines for each of the 4 areas. So the 4 areas are the West Shore Plan Area, what we're calling Greater Tahoe City, North Tahoe West, and North Tahoe East. The work program also includes a pretty robust public outreach strategy. The report today, you'll see, is very reflective of the work that we've actually been doing with the public. So I'll be reporting out on our outreach efforts. But the purpose really is just to make sure that the work that we're doing reflects the participation and feedback of the public. And it serves as a roadmap for how we engage the public in this process. As part of the outreach, we have a technical advisory committee that will be commenting on the documents as they take shape. We also have 4 separate citizen advisory groups. We call them our plan area teams. So if I'm referring to a team through this report, that's what I'm referring to. And they represent each of those 4 areas, the sub-planning areas. So we've held many, many community workshops, town hall meetings. We do regular updates to the NITRAC and the governing board, and then reports to your commission. And then we also have a website up and do quarterly newsletters. Everything that we've done to date has been posted on our website. So any notes from any past meetings, all work that's been done to date is up on the web. So in terms of progress to date, we continue to coordinate with TRPA. So that's just an ongoing coordination, and they're here today to answer any questions that you might have. Shane Navarro with TRPA is here. They have actually assigned a team of staff to work with us on this. So they've been working very closely, attending all of our meetings. We've held about 24 community workshops, 4 or 5 town hall meetings, stakeholder interviews, and regular updates. We have prepared preliminary draft zone district maps. We've actually prepared the maps for the commercial core areas in the Tahoe Basin, and those have been reviewed by our teams, the plan area teams. And then in-house staff has actually been zoning the entire area of the basin. Not a whole lot of change, but the plan area statements are going away, and so anything that was called conservation before would still be conservation, but we're having to look at all the zone districts in the basin. We've also we conducted a Kings Beach Vision Charette, which is sort of a series of workshops that was done this summer. I'm going to report out on that, so I'll walk you through the result of that, which is actually the Kings Beach Vision Plan. That is an actual booklet, like a document that was prepared. It's available online. It serves to inform our community plan process. We've also prepared an existing conditions report on the policy document. So again, background for the policy document. That contains an economic market analysis as an appendix that's also available online and serves as really kind of the foundation for the policy document development. And we conducted a Tahoe City Town Center Visioning Options public workshop. Again, I will talk a little bit more about that in the presentation. And then we're in the middle actually of conducting a series of topical policy workshops that are reflective of the existing conditions report, and they frame up the policy document that we're writing. So today, I'm going to report again on the Kings Beach Vision Plan, the Tahoe City Town Center Visioning Options workshop that we did. I'm going to talk about the team proposed, actually, and would just be the Tahoe City team proposed town center expansions, and I'll tell you a little bit more about what town centers are. Also, a team proposed land use changes in the basin. There's not a whole lot of land use changes, but I'll walk you through what the teams have proposed. And then we'll talk again about height and scale standards. And I know we talked about this when I met with you last in January. And we'll kind of walk you through existing standards, as your commission had asked that we come back and talk a little bit more about what is allowed under today's code, what the team's proposing, and then what staff is looking at in terms of standards. So what we're looking at here is just sort of general feedback from your commission on these items, and so that you can hear what the public has to say about these things too. So I just want to start on the Kings Beach Vision Charette. Again, a charrette, for those of you that don't know, is an intense planning session or kind of a series of workshops where community designers, other land use professionals, and really the public kind of come together and collaborate on a vision for development. In this case, it was related to just the Kings Beach commercial core area. And again, this was a part of the Tahoe Basin community plan update. So it was served as some sort of focused visioning to inform the community plan and the area plan for Kings Beach. So it's really intended to further the work that our plan area team had done over the last year, and just to engage in kind of a deeper dialogue with respect to, you know, the vision for just the commercial core. So it resulted in a vision plan. This booklet is intended to inform, again, the community plan and area plan. I just said that. And that is available online. I'm going to walk you through actually some of the renderings that were done as a part of that charrette process. So really focused on issues and possibilities that's seen in near future, specifically economic, environmental, community, and art in Kings Beach. It's an aspirational plan. It really illustrates possibilities. So there's a lot of graphics and renderings that came about from this. And the intent really is that it would be a catalyst to help seek implementation of standards in Kings Beach. We considered the new commercial core improvements. That was kind of a big piece. The Kings Beach commercial core improvements are going to be coming online next summer, so we considered that as an existing condition. And so the process was actually launched with early engagement with public agencies and the public, so we sought a lot of background information. And then the charrette itself was held in the middle of July from the 16th through the 18th. It was actually in this building. We had designers here pretty much around the clock, and the public were able to come in as designers were, you know, actually sketching renderings and putting the plan together. So it was a pretty open door kind of process. Was supported also by our plan area team, so they got to work directly with the designers, so that was a really great process that they got to participate in. And then the final presentation on the last day included key principles and these vision renderings that I've talked about. Now that's what I'm going to walk you through here in just a second. So what we heard from the public, I'm going to go through that real quick. We heard some of the constraints in Kings Beach have to do with the small parcels, so really the size of the parcels. Location, signage, and availability of parking were some key issues to look at. Large amounts of SEZ, which is stream environment zones, so the sensitive lands that are here that really reduce development opportunities. A lot of people talked about this building, kind of repurposing or trying to look at the future uses of this building, the event center. We heard that folks wanted to maintain this town character, kind of this eclectic feel that you have in Kings Beach. Certainly a need for visual improvements in gateways. We heard that, and environmental improvements as well. Some more just in terms of the event center, we heard about incorporating it into some sort of hotel program, like tying it as maybe a conference center, business retreat, incorporating a mix of uses, visual performing arts, open the building more to the lake if possible. So we heard a lot of things on that. That dialogue is still ongoing. The PUD will have their own, you know, if anything that they're doing here in this building, they'll have their own outreach for that. We also heard relative to this, yes.
Yeah, we're looking at some other event center discussions, but this building is this a county building or? It's
the PUD, the Public Utility District building.
Okay, so they would be, in terms of the outcome of this particular phase, would be kind of the key people?
Yes, they would. So this was, I mean, they were here and they were a part of the charrette process, so they heard what the public had to say. But anything that they do with this building, they will have their own further public engagement about the visioning for this building. So when I say that dialogue's still ongoing, there may be some change to this building at some point in the future. And if that happens, the dialogue will keep going and they will keep engaging the public. The county will be a part of that process as well.
Okay, so how then would the community plan interact with that?
Well, we look at it from a land use perspective and what types of uses would be allowed here in this building. And so right now it's more of kind of, a recreational type of uses are what's allowed on this entire, beach area. And so they could come in and propose a mix of uses. I don't think that that's the intent, that the PUD wants to, to do that in terms of commercial type uses. And certainly that's not, really what we heard from the public during the charrette process.
So the hotel type concept would be what you're talking about?
Oh, not for this building. No, the hotel concept would be looking at other opportunities in town that this building could leverage on if hotels were to come in and you had some sort of boutique anchor hotels in town. This building could be used for a conference center or business retreat where people could come to the hotel and then use this building to have meetings.
And that's something that can't happen in this building now, according to the zoning?
It can't. No, you can. It's an event center, so you can still do that. But the idea is how can you better utilize the building? Some people talk about going up. Is that what the community wants, to have a second floor to this building? And so, sort of repurposing it and just making it a little bit more active, a little more active of a use. And what I've heard is it's not utilized to its full extent.
So this is part of a vision more than a change in the community plan?
Correct, yeah.
Okay.
So then we also, a lot of discussion about the Kings Beach state recreation areas, so these areas over here behind me. We heard about focus on a beach center, and I'll talk a little bit more about this in a minute. A promenade along the beach connecting the entire town. Activate the plaza, so again, kind of not repurposing, but just trying to utilize the plaza a little bit more. A seasonal ice rink, we heard folks wanted that. Public kayak and paddleboard rack in the beach area. We also heard this notion of trails and connectivity, so connecting the beach to the upland trails in the U.S. Forest Service lands up in the other side of town. Transit and transportation, just focusing on that. Parking, the need for parking in town. Development ideas. Again, that hotel concept, we heard about certain sites for future development ideas. Building heights and design guidelines were talked about, and signage. So what came out of this is a bunch of principles, a series of principles actually. There are some that focused on, I'm not going to read all of these or I'll be here all day, but some of them came about of the sense of place, and this is the idea of maintaining, again, that character, that unique character in Kings Beach. There were a series of principles on connectivity and transportation, just really the idea of connecting people around and looking for opportunities for trails and getting people around from community to community through all kinds of modes of transportation. Environmental gains, this is the idea of restoring the sensitive lands that are in Kings Beach. And then economic vitality. So these were all brought about through the input that we heard at the charrette. So these principles are contained in the vision plan that is available online. And then it resulted in this rendering here that you see. Let's see if I can, I don't know that it's working over here, but I don't think it's going to. Anyway, the plan over on the left, that's the vision plan diagram, and that's available in your staff report package, and it just shows, mixed use throughout town. It shows a public pier over here on the south side of the beach area. It shows the linkages trying to get linkages between the beach area and the uplands. That's the green arrows that you see. So that's the ultimate vision diagram that came about from the charrette. And then these are some illustrations. This is like a little, the bottom right one is a amphitheater on the lake. And here, this concept was the beach center vision concept. We heard from people, apparently there used to be some pools here at Kings Beach, and so we heard a lot about bringing back the pools. And so this is an idea to activate the plaza area and the beach, and again, this is just a vision, so this doesn't necessarily mean it's going to happen, but it's just an idea. And so we illustrated the ideas that came about from the public. So this would enhance recreational opportunities, create a sort of winter destination. There would be a indoor pool area, and then perhaps a ice rink around this area as well. Again, public pier, water transportation came up as a vision concept. The idea is for public use. It would be at the end of Coon Street that you see there on the map. and then really promoting non-auto use so you can have water transport. And then the public, this is the actual renderings that came about through the charrette process for the pier. And then the beach promenade vision concept, this, we've heard this actually over the last year, and so it came up at all of our meetings we've had over the last year in Kings Beach, and then it also came up at the Charette. And this is the idea of having a pier that goes from one end of the beach or town to the next, and looking for opportunities to get that on the ground. And really it's about, walking and allowing, folks to move about through town and not necessarily have to be on the main street. So it connects to all the recreational uses and the various beaches that you have along here. And also we heard this idea of sand retention, that a lot of the sand is blowing up into the town, and that if you have a pier there, there's an opportunity to retain the sand. And so that's what you see here in this illustration. There's the existing beach, and you can kind of see how the sand's coming over there on the sidewalk. And so there would be an opportunity with the promenade that you could do some further landscaping, create a larger path there and try to retain the sand while also providing for, this increased walkability. Improved parking vision concept. We heard that there's a desire for a parking management strategy to kind of look at community-wide opportunities for parking. Decentralized parking, so looking at, all small lots that are scattered throughout town instead of, one large lot. Shared parking opportunities, reciprocal parking, those shared use, and then on-street parking. So really just looking at, really wanting the county to look at all opportunities that exist for parking and recognizing that the community feels that parking is a problem in Kings Beach in terms of the, the amount of parking we have. Explorable town forum, this is just an idea of kind of activating the town itself. This is Brook Avenue. And the idea of closing that off to be a pedestrian streetscape, so kind of an interesting walking environment, and you can have farmers markets and all kinds of festivals, and just activating that area. Improved accommodations. Again, this is that development opportunity that I had talked about earlier. Some folks had looked at a couple of different sites in town for development opportunities. This is one. This is the existing hotels that you'll see there on the top left. And this is a rendering of what could be done. I think what's important to note here is that this is we'll talk about height and scale later on in my presentation, and the plan area team had wanted 36 feet or 3 stories on the lakeside. And so when the designers actually created these renderings, this was to scale. So this kind of shows what could be done with the vision that the team actually had. So that's at 36 feet right there on the lakeside. And then this is another opportunity site. This is actually where the old, for those of that the old KFC site. So there's nothing there right now. It's a vacant lot. What you could do there, and this illustrates kind of a mixed-use infill vision concept. And I want to point out here too, what's interesting about this rendering is that it's also to scale. So the team had wanted a vision for 48 feet or 4 stories on the mountainside, what we call the mountainside of the highway. And so this is to scale there. That structure that you see there, that mixed-use structure, is scaled to 48 feet at 4 stories. And then finally
Excuse me?
Yes.
Who requested 48 feet?
The plan area team. So I'll talk about that a little bit later. But so we have these citizen advisory groups that have been working through us for the last year. And there's 9 of them for this area. And so that was their vision. Mm-hmm. And then this concept came up of State Route 267, this sort of gateway concept or an entry improvement there. And so this shows a roundabout. This was not a part of the commercial core improvement project. So if this came in later, it would be a standalone project that would come in. But the community did express a desire for this. Apparently, it's a little tight there in that intersection. It could potentially be done, but it was not something that was approved as part of the Kings Beach Commercial Core Improvement Project. But we did want to go ahead and illustrate it since it did come up over and over again through the charrette process. So the next thing so that was the Kings Beach vision plan. That's the final presentation on that. And the next thing I wanted to talk to you about is this Tahoe City. It's the Tahoe City Town Center visioning options. And so I'll tell you a little bit about what this was. And I think I reported to you on this process at our last Planning Commission workshop for this. The Tahoe City Town Center Visioning Options was a process and a document that was created in 2002 by the various different Tahoe City downtown stakeholders. So it wasn't a county process. Again, it was done actually by the same consultants that did the Kings Beach Visioning Plan. And so it was really a way to generate ideas about the future of Tahoe City. And so it was various different downtown stakeholders that actually sponsored that plan. The intent was, again, to generate these ideas that could perhaps be used to influence or to inform the community plan update process. So what could be done in Tahoe City? So again, it was not a county-led process, but it did result in some concepts and principles that the county felt they were worth further review by the county. And so what we did is we held a workshop on August 28th where we went over the concepts and the principles that were part of that process. And we did it to seek input and just engage in a dialogue with the public about that plan. And so we did receive some really great input. It was really well attended, and it resulted in some modifications or augmentations to the principles and to the vision diagram plan. And so that's what I want to go over with you today. So it included, the workshop itself included a detailed presentation by the visioning options, the consultants that had worked on that plan. Again, it's very much like the Kings Beach one. We also displayed maps of existing conditions, and then we broke out into these stations that you see here to get the input on these concepts. And so what we heard is this idea of linking trails and grooming trails in winter for access and cross-country skiing opportunities, so looking for those. We also heard about maintaining and improving lake views where you can, so really maintain those lake vista views. This river walk concept, which I'll talk a little bit more about later, came up again, and it's come up before at other meetings that we've held. But it's basically a river walk concept along the Truckee River. So really extending restaurants and accommodations for riverfront opportunities, really enhancing the waterway. And maintaining existing community scale and character, provides second-story dining opportunities for lake views. This two front door concept is the idea of in town that you have, a front door on Main Street, and then those businesses that front Main Street could also have a second door, a second entry on their on the end of their storefront, for example. So they would have a two front door concept. Came up over and over. Alleys.
Go back over that again.
Yeah, I think the best way for me to explain it is if you've ever been to Truckee and you're in town, you can enter any of those buildings on Main Street through the back or through the front. So it's the idea of kind of activating the town and having some access to the rear. And so that came up in this workshop that we had. And really is a good way to kind of link the golf course to the town. So it's this idea of integrating the golf course into the town. So we also heard this concentrating on restoration of sensitive lands. The golf course actually has a lot of SEZ, Stream Environment Zone lands, and really trying to restore those sensitive lands. Work with private property owners for mutually beneficial solutions, so trying to come up with ways to really help redevelop the town. This terrace concept, this is the idea of the commercial public realm along the lake front to enhance lake views. This has to do, again, with that second story where you have dining on the second story of buildings. Explore sites for improved hotel stock along the lake and river, because we heard that too. Improve wayfinding signage so people can get about the town easier. Consider a principle on environmental and lake protection. And then this diversity of industry and economy and increase full-time residency, sort of a need for our folks to, we heard people really want to be able to live, work, and play in Tahoe City. And then some more uses allowed to encourage pedestrians and enhance downtown with alleys and walkable retail. Consider parking management strategy. Again, this comes up over and over in every community, this idea of, or this need for better parking. And then we heard that the guiding principles should not identify specific sites for commercial uses. So maybe look at mixed use, but not identify specific sites for, say, hotel locations. a need for a mix of retail and beach, focus on inter-gateways at both ends of town, encourage locally owned businesses and hotels, and then transit opportunities, so shuttles, buses, trails, kind of similar things that we heard in the Kings Beach process. So this was the original vision diagram that had been done back in 2012, and it was modified as a result of this, the workshop that we held. And basically the modifications were, again, to just focus on mixed use, focus on some certain, you see the circles there, those are kind of potential roundabout areas or areas where the town center would meet, gateway areas. And then the addition, again, of the mixed use and removal of identified site-specific uses. So that diagram was actually modified. And then some principles were modified as well. We actually added a couple of principles. And so these are the principles. These are also included in your staff report package. So that was the Tahoe City vision options. And I bring that up only because a lot of those vision options are very consistent with what we've heard through the last year of visioning efforts that we've done with the Tahoe City Plan Area team, so that citizen advisory team for the Tahoe City area. And so it is included as a potential vision that would inform the community plan and the Tahoe City area plan. So that's why we're bringing it before you today for some further discussion. So now I want to just talk about the land use changes or any changes that are being proposed as a result of the team's visioning efforts. So in West Shore, we really focused on the commercial cores of Tahoe, Homewood, and Sunnyside, and really the only change is this allowance of mixed use. So right now, those are commercially zoned, and residential uses, specifically in Homewood, are only allowed with a use permit, actually. So they're not allowed by right. And so the focusing on mixed use for those districts would now make residential and commercial allowed by right. So it would reduce that use permit requirement, or eliminate it, actually. So that's really the only change in the West Shore area. That's going to be a fairly stable. We've heard from that community that they really want to maintain kind of their small scale community. For the greater Tahoe City Plan area, there's 3 areas that I'm going to talk about. One is the Truckee River Corridor sites. There are 3 sites in the Tahoe City that I want to talk about, and then this Lake Forest Dollar Hill site. So this is the Truckee River. This is as you're coming up the river. There's a welding shop and some other service type uses. These were actually zoned years ago to allow for those types of uses, and then when the community plan was last updated, they were downzoned to recreation. And so the team and county staff would like to look at a change in use for these sites just to recognize the existing uses that are there. And so the existing legal nonconforming uses would then become allowed by a matter of right. So we're proposing a mixed-use service for those areas. And then this is what I refer to in your staff report packet as Area A. So this is in Tahoe City, and this is a site along the river in between Highway 89 and the Truckee River. It's where you see the lumber yard, and then the Caltrans right-of-way is actually right where it says Truckee River there. That's the Caltrans courtyard that you've seen there, if anybody's come up Highway 89. And so it's currently zoned for recreational and supportive commercial uses. Again, an existing lumber yard is on site. And the Tahoe City team, again, the Citizen Advisory Group, had proposed a mix of uses, including tourist uses. So the idea of some potential hotel uses on that site to allow for kind of a mixed-use commercial tourist use. And so I bring this up because that's an area where we would seek your feedback on that change. The next area is considered Area B in your staff report package. This is what's called the 64 Acre Site. This is where the transit center, I don't know if you have seen the new transit center that's in town in Tahoe City. So this site runs along the Truckee River and along Highway 89. And it actually fronts the lake as well. And so it's currently zoned for recreation and supportive commercial. It's outside of what's called the TRPA Town Center Overlay District. So TRPA, through their regional plan, had designated 3 areas in Placer County as town centers. And so these are really receiving areas for development. a little higher intensity of height and density that could happen within the town centers. The town centers are Tahoe City, Kings Beach, and North State Line. Well, this area is actually outside of the town center, but it's in between two pods of the Tahoe City Town Center. So the area that you see below there, the light colored area, that's part of the town center, and then the area above it is also a part of it. And so it's actually currently considered in our community plan today as an influence area, so like a sphere of influence to consider for inclusion into the town center. Again, it's an existing transit center use. Apparently, it's historically been used for, there was a trailer park on site and other commercial uses in the past. But the team has proposed that this site be integrated into the town center and that we apply a mixed use kind of recreational, same type of uses, but that you recognize it as part of the town center. There is a very specific criteria for proposing, like if we come forward to TRPA and want to propose that it is included in the town center, we do have to meet very specific criteria. We're working on that analysis right now in-house, but we just wanted to, we bring this up today just to seek your, some general feedback on that concept. The next area is considered Area C in your packet, and this is the golf course site. This is currently zoned for residential. And it is outside, again, of the TRPA Town Center boundary. So the boundary is, just to the green area that you see there is the actual town center, and the white that's circled there, it's owned by the utility district, and it is not in the town center boundary today. It is currently considered, however, an influence area, again, in the community plan. So it was seen in the past community plan as a potential for inclusion into the town center. It is developed right now with the existing golf course and clubhouse, and the team has proposed to integrate this as well into the town center, so that would be an expansion of the town center, and then put a master plan overlay on it so that any future developer that came in would have to go through a master plan. So no specific land uses proposed for that site, but the inclusion into the town center, we did do an analysis on this, and it actually does meet the criteria that is outlined in the TRPA regional plan if we chose to move forward with a proposal to include it.
So, Crystal?
Yes.
Just a question on that. You said it's currently zoned residential.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the community plan could recognize a different zoning if it was desired by the community. Is that correct?
We could do either. We could put assign land uses to it, or something different from residential, or we could put a master plan. It would be kind of like a future study area, mm-hmm. where a developer would come in and have to address the land use component of it.
Okay, so that's still open option.
Correct.
For the community.
Yes. Okay. Yeah.
Thank you.
And staff we haven't taken a position on this site yet in terms of the zoning part of it. And so again, I think it's important to note that a very large portion of this land is in what's called SEZ, so the Stream Environment Zone, so highly sensitive land. There's a small portion that near the clubhouse area that has the potential for some future development or increased intensity in terms of land use, but a lot of the site would need to be restored. And then finally, the last one for the Tahoe City plan area is this Dollar Hill Lake Forest site. This site is currently, it contains a vacant commercial structure, so there was once some commercial uses here. It's zoned for residential and public services. It was previously zoned for commercial and has historically had commercial uses on it. And so the team and staff actually has proposed a mixed-use neighborhood designation to allow for kind of small-scale commercial uses. It's, it's contiguous to the area there that you see to the right of it, in the darker shaded kind of cream color area. That is all would be mixed-use commercial, so it would be contiguous to that. And so the proposal would be just to allow for commercial uses on that small site. So this should say, it says Greater Tahoe City, I apologize. This should say North Tahoe West at the top there. This is the Carnelian Bay and Tahoe Tahoe Vista areas. And the teams, really the only changes that you're going to see here, again, are this allowance for mixed use. So allowing commercial and residential within the existing commercial core areas. So right now, residential is not an allowed use, and so it would be recognizing any existing residential uses that would be there and just allowing for residential uses to evolve within the town if that were to occur. Same thing here, you're not going to see a lot of changes. This is the Kings Beach and the North State Line area. What's different about these two areas, though, is that both of these are included as town centers. So again, they are designated by TRPA as town center overlay districts, so you can go a little higher in terms of the size of the buildings, and a little bit denser in terms of the density of the land uses that would be proposed by a developer. So a little bit more of an opportunity, if you will, for redevelopment in Kings Beach, North State Line, and Tahoe City. So last, I just want to talk about scale, and I won't go through every single one of these, but just real quick. So you had asked me at the last workshop about existing standards relative to height allowances. And so in the West Shore area, existing height is up to 42 feet throughout all areas of the commercial cores. And again, based upon TRPA code. So they look at slope and site design to get to 42 feet, but you could go potentially up to 42 feet. The team has proposed in these areas for Tahoe 2 stories for all. They didn't designate a specific height, but typically speaking for commercial development, it would be, you see 12 feet would be 1 story. So 2 stories would be 24 plus the height that you would need for a roof pitch, so about 36 feet for 2 stories. So that's what we heard from the team. Homewood, 2-story lakeside, 3-story mountainside for most of the areas, and I'll show you a map real quick, which is also included as attachment H in your staff report. It varied a little bit in the Homewood area, and then Sunnyside, 2-story for all areas within the Sunnyside commercial core. And so this is staff proposed. This is what we're looking at right now, and what we're doing is really would like to kind of seek your feedback on that, listen to what the public has to say, and kind of give some general feedback on height standards. So for Tahoe, 2 stories, lakeside, 3 stories, mountainside. Same thing with Homewood and Sunnyside. So allowing up to 42 feet on the mountain and up to 36 on the lakeside. And again, this came up in a lot of the teams is this idea of preserving the lake views, so it would be a way of reducing scale on lakeside properties. But I think it's just important to note that under today's code, you could go up to 42 feet on both lake and mountainside. So this is just a map. You can see these are all 2 stories that we kind of mapped what the teams had envisioned. And here you'll see in Homewood it changes just a little bit. And I want to point out too, this excludes the Homewood ski resort project. So we didn't look at that. That ran its own course and went through our board and went through the TRPA governing board. So we did not address that project. For the Greater Tahoe City team, under TRPA's regional plan, you can actually go up to 56 feet. Area plans can come up with standards that would allow for 56 feet within the town center, 42 feet for areas outside of the town center. So anything within that sort of commercial core area that I talked about, you could potentially go up to 56 feet. And the team had proposed generally, and I should say 56 feet and 4 stories. You can't go to 5 stories, but you could go to 4. And so the team had generally wanted 4 stories mountainside of Highway 28 and 4 stories along 89. In town, it really varied, and I'll show you the map here in a minute. And then for the Dollar Hill Forest Lake area, or Lake Forest area, they wanted 36 feet for really that entire area, which you could potentially get, I guess, 3 stories, but more than likely 2. And here's a map that shows what the team had kind of come up with. It really varies in town. But generally, 2 stories kind of on the lakeside at 36 feet. And then as you move across the highway to the mountainside, you have an increased height. For the golf course, you can see there on they had looked at 1 story. Again, on the SEZ portions of the golf course, those would just really need to be restored. And so any potential development could only really occur on the height land capability areas.
Okay, question, go back.
Yes.
2 stories at street level. Do I understand that if it's on a slope and you're going down to the lake, it could be 3, 4, 5 stories technically, but it's still only 2 at the street.
Right, 2 at the street, so, you know, potentially 4 if you could. I mean, that's a tight site. That's the Common
Yeah,
Beach
like
site,
Beach or
but
something like that would-
yeah.
Okay.
And then Dollar Point, again, 36 for the entire, now these are, again, the commercial cores of Dollar Hill and Lake Forest. And then for the North Tahoe West plan area, again, existing height all the way through is 42 feet. That's what would be allowed under TRPA code. You cannot go up to 56 feet in these areas because they're not in the town centers. And the team had proposed, it kind of varied a little bit too, so I'll show the map, but 2 stories lakeside for the most part of Highway 28, 3 stories on the mountainside. It varied a little bit, mostly in Tahoe Vista. And so we were considering the same thing, 2 stories lakeside up to 36 and 4 stories mountainside. But I think, again, it's important to note that based upon today's code, you could go up to 42 on both. So here's a map that just kind of shows what the team, again, this is what the team had envisioned. And here is where it changed a lot. You can see even there's one area of one story on the lakeside. And then in the North Tahoe, what we call the North Tahoe East, so this is Kings Beach and North State Line. This is actually, the team here had really wanted to see all 36 feet lakeside and 48 feet on the mountainside for, I'm on Carnelian Bay. I put the wrong one in there. I'm sorry. We'll just go right here. So it's all on the Kings Beach would be 36 feet on all of the lakeside and 48 feet on the mountainside. So with 48 feet, you could presumably get 4 stories, and lakeside, you could get 3. And then for North State Line, it kind of varied. Mostly the same thing, largely the 36 and 48 on the mountainside, except for the Calneva site with an allowance of 48 feet. I think it's important to note that the tower of Calneva is not in, I think most people know that, it's not in Placer County, it's in El Dorado. So really the portions of the Calneva that are in Placer are the lower scaled buildings that you see there on the Calneva site.
Washoe County, yeah.
And I threw this in, did I say Washoe? I'm sorry. Did I say El Dorado? I'm tired. I apologize. And I just threw this in there. This was done through the area plan work for the city of South Lake Tahoe, and I really just wanted to show this to you just to give you an idea of what scale looks like in terms of a structure. So here on the left, you see the max height of 48 feet, and you can see 3 stories there. So really you've got, you presumably could have, 12-foot stories, and then your top story or your top roof, you might have an attic or something like that in the top, some sort of loft. And then again, the 56 feet, this would only be allowed, the one on the right, would only be allowed within the town center areas. So we have an opportunity to go a little higher in those areas. And you could potentially get 4 stories. And so the top, again, 12 for the stories, and then the top roof pitch would be 8 feet. So I just bring those up. The residential is to your, anywhere from 24 to 42 feet. So I just bring those up to give you some perspective of height if you want to go back and look at that. So I'm done with that part.
Okay, well, I have one question
Yes.
before you go on then. Coming back to the 2-story limits.
Uh-huh.
At one place it was 2 stories at street level. Other places were just 2 stories, even though it's on the same side of the street and in the lake. What's the difference there?
Between the 2 and the 3, is that?
No, what's the difference in designating a 2-story at street level as opposed to a 2-story?
Well,
When you have other places along the lake where you could only have for 2 stories, even though at street level it may only be 1 and could go down to 3 or 4
Right.
by the time you reach the lake.
well, the idea for that, that was only proposed by the team for that one area, and that's the Commons Beach area, that property. And the idea there is that you've got, it slopes down significantly. And so if you have 2 stories at the top, this is now, and I'm just repeating what what their vision was. If you have 2 stories on the top, it would be consistent with the remaining, 2 stories going along, the lakeside of Highway 28. So it would be consistent with that, but yet you could potentially get, another story or 2 below, but have the appearance of it being 2 stories from the street. So that was the intent, and again, that's only for the Commons Beach site.
And that wouldn't be allowed elsewhere under the same kind of guidelines, just there?
It's allowed actually under today's code, yeah. So that was their proposal. That one was a little bit unique, and a little different. I think they were just looking at, any opportunity that you might have, on the Commons Beach site specifically. And that was actually you'll see in your notes, there were some notes that were provided for you today from a meeting that we had on the 21st with the team, and that was what they came up with on the 21st.
Well, following up on that, is the general purpose of the height limits for view?
Yes and no. On the lakeside, I think I should point out that we have to, under TRPA's code, come in with some standards that would preserve, the scenic threshold, right? So that you meet the scenic threshold, and part of that is the view sheds. And so all of these standards will have design guidelines for heights. So what we'll try to do is work on and we're actually doing that right now, working on standards where we look at building articulation and modulation, the linear footage or linear length of, a building, a structure, so you don't have a wall, feeling within town, and trying to look for all kinds of opportunities to get these little, either improve or preserve view sheds where you can, as the town, is built out. So yes, we would, but the idea is that, and that came across from all of the teams really, is this idea of trying to kind of lower the height standards on the lakeside as a way to preserve views. So we have heard that over and over again.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm. So just to talk real quick about next steps, we'll again continue to hold regular town halls and reports to NITRAC, your commission, and the board. We're finalizing our policy workshops. We have our last policy workshop on November 6th. It's here in this building at 5 p.m., and it's on transportation. We will be preparing an administrative draft policy document through the winter. Should be out. The admin draft should be available in January. And then prepare 4 administrative draft area plans. Again, the area plans are where the standards are. So that's the zoning, the development standards, and design guidelines. And so those will implement the policy document. We're actually working on those now. And then we will hold TAC and team meetings. So the citizen advisory group folks will be meeting with them, allowing them to review the draft documents and having meetings to review their comments on those. That'll be in spring. We will begin environmental analysis probably in late spring. Anticipated Planning Commission and Board of Supervisors deliberations fall and winter of 2014, and then anticipate to be before TRPA for conformance review. Ensuring that it conforms to the regional plan. That would be in spring 2015. So that's where we are in terms of next steps. So the recommendation today, there's no formal action necessary. It's intended to provide you with a report. Sorry for the long report. And then really just to generate any discussion or feedback from your commission. So I'd be happy to answer any other questions.
Yeah, I have one, Crystal, or maybe two.
Okay.
Let me see. The Tahoe Basin includes, a considerable amount of public lands, both national forest as well as state parks. So I'm presuming that the TRPA level, there was a good deal of jurisdictional coordination that went on. But when we get down to the community plan level with the scattering of lands, this plan is likely to place some expectations on the public lands. You're talking about recreation, vegetation management, that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm just wondering what type of coordination is going on with those other jurisdictions in this case.
Yeah, we have formed what's called a technical advisory committee, so a TAC, and all of those agencies are on the TAC. So we have already been meeting with them. For the Kings Beach Charette process that we had, because of these public lands right here, they were in this building the entire, pretty much at every meeting that we had. So we've definitely been outreaching to all public agencies and really encouraging this, strong coordination as we move through this process. They will be, as part of the TAC, they will be reviewing all of the documents that we prepare, for technical accuracy and making sure they're going to give us feedback on those documents from a technical perspective and making sure that they're, conform to the various different plans of the agencies.
Okay, good, thank you. The second question is, in the Tahoe City area, the 64 acres,
Mm-hmm.
and so that belongs to, that's a public
Forest
a lot of this
Service.
public land there. And so I was wondering if that becomes part of the city core, is that indicating or suggesting a change in ownership or change in management?
No, and we don't anticipate any change in use. So the land use designation and the zoning designation, and even the team, the Citizen Advisory Group for Tahoe City hasn't identified any desire for a change in use on that site.
Okay, so this is mainly just to kind of consolidate the area?
Yeah, they had talked about this idea of, right now in the Tahoe City area, you've got, the areas where the old county building used to be, that's a part of the town center. And then, so it's sort of fractured. And the rest of the town center is where kind of the commercial core area is. And so this idea of how do you, having these two town centers, how can you link them? Should it all be one town center? And so that's really what we heard. We have no position on the 64 acre site at this time. And that's why we bring it for, before you today, is just to kind of get some general feedback on it. But I think the idea and the intent was to, look at opportunities for trails and connections to try to connect those two town center areas, but maintain that sort of recreational use on site.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Anything else?
Well, I'm just going to comment on his comment, and that is that there is a proposal working its way through the system right now where the majority of the small lots that the Forest Service owns, for example, will be traded to the Conservancy, the Tahoe Conservancy. In exchange, the Tahoe Conservancy will give to them large parcels that are conducive to their more easily managed by them, and that I think will help quite a bit in the communities, because people don't always know what their neighbor is, and it could be kind of confusing from time to time. But that's being worked on at this point.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? No? So I
was just going to ask.
Oh, yes.
What was the comment that was made during the public comment period and about Tahoe Vista and linking some of these community plan updates in some way?
So there is a current planning project that is in. It's the SPI, Sierra Pacific Industries, and the North Star folks are in for a project that it would be in the North Tahoe West plan area, which is just above Tahoe Vista. And there's a portion of the site that they're proposing that kind of hangs over into the basin. That is not an area that we have looked at through my process. It's not anything that I've been managing as part of this process. So it's a proposal by the developers. It would require an area plan, and so it's being run as a separate project. I don't know a whole lot about it. I'm not the lead on that. Somebody else is in the county, and ultimately it would be something that would be before your commission for consideration. So that's what was being referred to. We hear from the community this, potential desire that we should have looked at it through our process, because there's a small portion that hangs over. But I haven't addressed it through this process, and I was directed that will run a separate course. It's its own project. So that's what they were talking about.
That's the same area that we heard about at the public comment at the beginning?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. It's a small, I'm not sure the total acreage is, but I'm sure that you will, I know you'll hear about it at some point, but it's not something that we've addressed through the community plan update process.
Maybe to clarify it just a tiny bit, it's being proposed because the owner of the property thinks it's not in the Tahoe Basin. And so that's where the until that issue is resolved, it's not going to be known whether there's going to be a project or not a project. If it's in the Tahoe Basin, it's pretty likely there won't be a project. If it proves up that there was a correction needed for the basin line, in other words, anything that runs into the basin is part of the basin, anything that goes the other way isn't, there's some concern that maybe the line was originally drawn.
So this is going to be a legal question?
Well, I don't know whether it's legal or whether it's a boundary. It could turn out to be legal, but it's a boundary line question, because I've walked the site recently, and there's a good part of it that drains into Truckee, and you can have a nice view of the lake. So, I mean, it's going to be a catch-22 in a sense.
Crystal, we've had a lot of drawings, a lot of different changes, mixed use, in
Uh-huh.
commercial, this and that. But in your opinion, as a planner, is this new proposed plan more intense in the development area, or less intense, or the same intensity, just with a different look to it?
Well, I think the idea is that the intensification of uses would occur within the town centers. So as I said previously, I think you're going to see more opportunity for redevelopment and higher intensity of land uses within Tahoe City, Kings Beach, and North State Line. But we went into this process knowing that there's a need in all of the communities really for some redevelopment. And so what we're doing through this process is trying to eliminate or reduce barriers, that related to zoning or to standards to allow for that redevelopment to occur. So tightening up the design standards and sort of the expectation of what the county wants to see, so that folks can come in through the process and know exactly what they need to do to get a project done, and if it conforms to those standards, make the process easier for them to get through. So that's really the overall intent. But in terms of the land use intensity, as part of the regional plan, really the idea was to try to get development into the town centers, yes, and retire, some development in the sensitive lands.
The overall development along this whole area would maybe be the same, but more concentrated in the town centers?
I think our hope is that all areas could see some revitalization, but in terms of intensity, yes, within the town centers, I think there's more opportunity there. And TRPA could probably, Shay Navarro here, can probably speak a little bit more to sort of the overall intent of the regional plan in terms of that. Yeah, intensity. And then I just want to point out too, if I've got a sign-in sheet here, so anybody that comes to give public comment, if they could sign in, that would be great. Any other questions? No. Thank you. Sorry for my long presentation.
All right, now I'm going to open the meeting to public comment. I'm going to ask that you keep your comments to approximately 3 minutes to 4 minutes. And please, if you can, don't repeat what the person in front of you just told us. All right? Please come on up.
Good morning, Ellie Waller, member of the North Tahoe West team, which is Tahoe Vista, Carnelian Bay. I have attended other team meetings just to watch the process, to see how other teams address. Today, I will address the height issues. Staff even stated it's confusing in their staff report on page 15. I think we really need to revisit stories versus height. You could have 2 stories up to 36 feet. You could have 3 stories up to 36 feet. That makes it very confusing for a developer that would come in. I think the 2 stories needs to be more definitive at a lesser height outside town centers. Again, this has been a major problem with all the teams, height versus stories. That really needs to be revisited. I think you should ask for an agenda item for the Martis Valley West parcel that Mr. Sevenson is talking about. The Board of Supervisors was briefed on the initial application this month. There was some robust discussion on it, and I think you should also have that same presentation. Paul Thompson, the staff planner, stated that there's 112 acres in the Tahoe Basin, with 85 that are potential for development at the Fiberboard Freeway entrance point, and then on up it segues into the Martis Valley border. Again, I can't emphasize more that commercial neighborhood cores are different than town center cores. So again, the height should be visited differently for Tahoma on the West Shore versus how Tahoe City is viewed. So these heights are staff proposals right now. I don't think the teams have nailed down these numbers, and I'm looking forward to getting those documents in the spring. I think we should have more than one opportunity to go over those documents, because there's so much of this information that I believe the teams still haven't come to consensus on. We do have votes during our team meetings, but there are some huge issues about the density and scale of how the different communities are going to come together. I'll keep it at that, and I'll look forward to seeing you folks again on this.
Thank you. The next person would please enter and sign in, please.
Morning, Ann Nichols. What I've been concerned about, I'm a realtor for 42 years up here, Nevada and California. What I've been concerned about and I've owned businesses and do own a business and had retail and restaurant and all that. We have too much commercial. And by expanding our boundaries to include the 64 acres, to include the river, I mean, if I was a developer new, I would go to those areas rather than, and what we of course need is them to go to the town centers and redo what's bad there. But it's easier to go to new areas than to go to existing. So I don't know that we're going to achieve our goals by expanding to the golf course, to the river, to the, I mean, couldn't we do that after the fact, after we fix the town centers first and, you know, have some sort of provision, you know, and how much can we really support? We have this weird population swing between hardly anybody and then, you know, 100,000 plus people on the weekends. And we were always asking in our community plan team process, I'm on the plan area team east, what is our existing inventory? We never were provided with that. We did get a marketing economic analysis that was not helpful at all in that regard. The conclusion was we need large-scale developments, not looking at boutique developments at all, which I think is really good. You know, we can't compete with North Star and Squaw. We just can't. We need to be cool, low-impact boutique. And then the other conclusion was to tax the locals for infrastructure. Well, there's hardly any of us. What we need to know is what's the inventory, what can we support with commercial, giving our existing full-time and tourist population. We can, as you all know, we could have as big a restaurant as you could ever want in certain weekends, but the rest of the time, the restaurant's too big. So that's, I'm worried about this expansion idea. And when they were talking about the 64 acres at the meeting, they were talking about mixed-use recreation. What is that? You know, we need this open space. We need, you know, if it's really using our recreation and open space that would be beneficial to the tourists and to the locals, that would be great. But I really don't understand what that means. So those were my major comments. We really need an analysis of what we have and what we can support. Thank you.
You know, I think, excuse me, I just kind of have a little question here, or maybe it's almost a statement, but at any rate, at least what I was hearing was that 64 acres is, you know, jurisdictionally under the control of the National Forest. And so, at any rate, a change of the use there would require the National Forest to be involved.
Well, I don't think it's all National Forest, is it? Is it all Forest Service? Yes, sir. So what is mixed-use commercial?
Well, that would be, the actual criteria for that parcel would be included in the Basin's plan. Okay. Their land use plan. And so, unless TRPA or, I guess, in the Forest Service decide to change that land use, then it wouldn't change. Well, so that'd be a separate public process, as far as I can understand.
Yeah, so the land uses would not change. It's recreation right now. We'd be calling it mixed-use recreation just to kind of recognize right now it allows for supportive commercial, you know, small retail, maybe kayak concession stands, those types of things. And so it's just a labeling term as mixed-use recreation, but the uses we're not proposing any land use change.
And I think the key thing there is that parcel would be governed by the National Forest land use plan.
I think those questions are the ones that are confusing, and certainly about the river and about the golf course, it's a different issue.
Probably be addressed by your request for an inventory, and this inventory would explain who controls what.
Right, and you know, the new uses would be, with the TRPA, it's 40 units per acre for tourist accommodation versus today is 15 units an acre. The height right now is like 36 feet to going to 56 feet. So it's definitely an intensity of use, so, of what's proposed. Thank you.
Good morning, Shannon Eckmeyer from the League to Save Lake Tahoe, and I apologize. I'm going to echo a lot of Ann's concerns. I know you said not to bring up the same issue, but I believe this is a really important one that we want on record. Sorry?
Short.
Oh, it will be. Okay. It will be. I first want to thank both TRPA and Placer County staff for continuing the open lines of communication throughout the planning stages of this process with us. While there hasn't been any formal proposals for the town center expansion, the Tahoe City Visioning and the presentation you saw today are proposing expansion of the Tahoe City Town Center boundary to include the golf course and the 64 acres of Forest Service land. These boundaries were created through the regional plan update through TRPA and are intended as receiving sites for redevelopment. The golf course, as Crystal stated, is primarily sensitive land, and the forest land, like you just discussed, or the 64 acres is forest land. These areas are not appropriate for the type of development that the town centers were created for. So we believe and have been talking to TRPA and Placer County staff that there's other ways to incorporate these areas to accomplish the Tahoe City Visioning and include these areas as gateways that the community is intending. For example, renaming these areas or creating a town center overlay specifically for Placer County so that it's not conflicting with the bi-state agreement and the intentions of the regional plan update. So the League welcomes any opportunity to continue working with Placer County and TRPA to figure out a different way to resolve this issue. Thank you.
Very well done.
Just a comment.
Yes.
About the Tahoe City plan. It was unfortunate back in 1982, I guess it was, or 3 along in there when we did the Basin plan the first time, that there were the owners of, for example, the Tahoe City Golf Course, of their own volition, chose not to be part of the community plan. They just said, you know, we hate TRPA, we don't have anything to do with you, leave us out. And so we drew a line around them and left them out. Well, that was an unfortunate thing to have happen because they are, in fact, part of the Tahoe City community plan, just by their location. And so I don't want you to think that the reason they're not in, or haven't traditionally been in the Tahoe City community plan is for some other reason than the fact that it was just a self-imposed thing that the owners of that property at that time asked for. So now the community is trying to tell the world that we want that brought back into the community plan so that we can make it part of our community and have some say in how it's used and developed. Now, it is true that a good part of it is considered SEZ or man-modified or other other designations, but there is some portion of it that is and could be considered useful for the development in the town center. There's also some other land that now looks like it may become available. It's been owned by another family in Tahoe City that is badly in need of redevelopment, and the whole package is contingent upon, you know, working hand in glove, I guess. And so at any rate, I wouldn't support taking the golf course just arbitrarily out of the community plan and saying, you know, it's not suited for the community plan, because it has been and still is, but designations have to be understood that are appropriate for the site, and I guess that's the bottom line.
And if I could follow up with a quick comment on Mr. Sevenson, I actually went on a site tour a few months ago with Placer County, Tahoe City PUD, and TRPA staff around the golf course, and there are certain areas outside of the current Tahoe City town center boundary, including the parking lot and also the clubhouse, that aren't part of the town center boundary, and we think expanding the center to those areas that are already developed we'd be fine with that type of expansion. But as far as the actual golf course and the 64 acres, we think there's other ways of achieving the visioning rather than expanding the actual TRPA boundary. Again, it might be different designations or how you want to create an overlay, but it will just take an extensive amount of time for environmental review to make that kind of change to a town center boundary, because it would be an amendment to the regional plan update, map, and code. So it'd just be a very long process. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, good morning, Placer County Commissioners. My name's Shay Navarro. I'm one of the staff with TRPA that's been working alongside with Placer County with this process. So I just wanted to indicate that we've been working closely with Placer, attending the public workshops and meetings, and providing input on the draft visioning documents and existing conditions report. We look forward to receiving the policy document, the draft policy document, in the new year. And our main role is to really look at conformance with the regional plan, and also our area plan framework, our plan and code. So this is a document that we provided to Placer County. It basically outlines what the requirements are for area plans. It includes the code section and the draft conformance review checklist. It's been a big endeavor for Placer County compared to some of the other counties with this area plan process. Placer is actually only one of 2 counties that's doing the entire portion of the county within the Tahoe Basin as their area plan. So it's definitely a lot of parcels and different areas to focus on. So it is a big process. Washoe County is the other county that's doing the entire portion of their county in the Tahoe Basin, and they've just started, so they're definitely not as further along, but compared to some of the other area plans that are being brought forward to TRPA. So just wanted to provide that context and our role. I'm happy to answer any questions that you guys have, but I just wanted to speak in support of Placer County.
So do you see any conflicts so far?
We've definitely provided input on the height. There was some height that was brought forward from some of the groups originally back, I think, in December, almost a year ago, that we flagged that was, out of alignment with our plan and code and the allowances for the town centers. I think that, there could be some confusion referencing stories, and for some of the other area plans, we've only set the feet designation in terms of how much height you're allowed to go up to, and then have just referenced Chapter 37 of TRPA code. As far as the height that they've designated for the different town centers, everything that's been proposed is within what our allowances are. So, and I think everything else outside as well, but, and then, we've commented also on the town center boundary. I think we're in support of the clubhouse site and the lower area that backs along kind of the developed area of the golf course. And I think, we're in conversation with Placer County. I think there needs to be some analysis of the benefits of including these other parcels in the town center. I know there's a land capability verification currently underway for the golf course. If it is sensitive, it's probably unlikely it could be developed in any real capacity if it's, 1B or, a sensitivity land capability classification. The town center regional plan overlay, the boundaries were really initiated based on the community plan boundaries. That was the original boundaries, but we have had some other boundary changes proposed by other counties. We'll see what happens with Douglas County. I think that they're looking at potentially incorporating a developed site and looking at expanding the town center. I don't know if that will go through or not. I know Myers is proposing to actually shrink their town center to remove some sensitive land from it, because the town center is really intended to be an overlay to direct, it's intended to identify areas in need of redevelopment and as receiving areas for transfers of development to allow kind of a more intensification. There are some different conformance review items that they have to look at if you're in a town center or a regional center, but as far as, area plans, right now the 64-acre site and the golf course site are in the area plan, so they still will meet, have to adhere to all the general review standards for area plans that says things like protect and direct development away from stream environment zones and other sensitive areas while seeking opportunities for environmental improvements. Whereas the town centers and regional center are really looking at ensuring adequate capacity for redevelopment and transfers of development rights to town centers. So, we're in discussion about it, and again, this is just something that Placer County's talking about, and we don't have a formal proposal. Other area plans, like for example, the city of South Lake Tahoe, their tourist core area plan that just got advanced to APC by our regional plan implementation committee, that boundary follows the town center and regional center from the state line to Ski Run, but there is open space within that. So there's, a variety of different ways that it can be addressed. And again, I think really it just there needs to be an analysis done to see what are the benefits of changing it to town center. A change to the town center boundary requires an amendment to the regional plan, amendment to the regional plan maps. It requires more vigorous environmental review. It's kind of a trade-off in terms of, why do you want to include it in there? I think I understand the vision of having a center of town and having connections and recreational access and things like that. And, those are things that are called out in the area plan conformance review. So again, if you guys aren't familiar with this framework packet, and I can make sure Crystal has it to pass on to you, it does really outline the intent of the area plans. It provides the code section, chapter 13, with all of the requirements and allowances, as well as how we're going to review it. And then it also gives the draft conformance review checklist that we will evaluate the area plans on to make sure that they conform with the regional plan.
So I have a question. Back to the 64 acres.
Yep.
From the TRPA point of view, if the National Forest part of the 64 acres becomes part of the town center, in terms of the management, does that call for any change?
I don't believe so. If it remains with the Forest Service, I think any change in the land use classification would have to be authorized by the Forest Service, and it's my understanding that it's intended to be kept as recreation. So again, we have some parcels in the tourist core area plan that are either zoned as open space or recreation that are within that boundary, but changing the boundary just is kind of an arduous process. So.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, I'm Gary Davis. I was on the Placer County Tahoe City Area Plan team, also part of the Tahoe City visioning process, and I'm president of the Tahoe City Downtown Association. But just to give you our perspective, our plan area team, and I think there's 3 of us here today, can say that we, with consensus, accepted the principles of the visioning plan that was done back in 2012 for Tahoe City. Our whole intent with our area plan team is to work within the confines or the rules of the RPU as approved last December. So within those height limits, and of course all the normal constraints regarding land coverage, parking requirements, all the other normal constraints that go with this, we feel we want the opportunity to have the area plan or the plan cover these areas like the golf course, like the 64 acres, because we're looking at a window of 20 to 30 years down the road. We're not looking in the short term for a couple years here. We have to think long term. Look how long it took to get the RPU approved from when they started with their last area plan. So we're looking in the long term just for opportunity, and it's going to have to fit within the height restrictions and all the other restrictions that go within it. So the one thing I do agree with is probably the height limits need to be defined the way Placer County height limits are currently, where you take a certain level of the building and a certain height and you do whatever you want to do within that framework, or at least suggest the 2 stories, but I wouldn't require 2 stories and a number. I'd go with a number. It's just easier for developers to define. And of course, Mr. Sevenson pointed out that they opted out on the golf course when they could have easily opted in. And that was a very arbitrary decision on their part. Well, not arbitrary on their part, but it was, they had the choice at that time. 64 acres, as we know, was largely a trailer park for a long period of time. It's high capability land. Certainly within the landowners, the federal landowners' opportunity to do whatever they want with it, and they'll probably keep it recreation. The large percentage of the golf course is going to stay open space. It's going to be SEZ, and so whether we designate that or not, it's still going to remain SEZ, and it's not going to be buildable or developable. But there's some very valuable parts to the golf course property, the contiguous with the other commercial core there, that provide opportunity in the future for somebody to maybe bring some parcels together and do something a little more significant than these small old historic parcels that you can't get parking on, and you can't get, without height increases, any kind of redevelopment that makes any sense for our community. And we all know we need some redevelopment for some of these tired old buildings that have been there for 50, 60, 80 years that don't provide any economic vitality for our town. So thank you.
Good morning, gentlemen. Welcome to North Lake Tahoe. My name's Alex Morolatos. My family owns the Morolatos Lakeshore Resort, which is a property in the middle of Tahoe Vista. We have both lakefront and forest side parcels. On the forest side, our parcels are both in and out of the current community plan. And I've been a participant in the Tahoe North planning group that looked at Tahoe Vista and Carnelian Bay. And I just had a couple of quick points. I wanted to applaud staff for the work done to date. It was being a layperson and being involved in a planning exercise. It's can be very daunting and confusing, a lot of the terms and concepts that we reviewed. But I do feel that we achieved a degree of consensus on a lot of these important issues. I wanted to specifically point out and applaud the application of mixed use. Although there might be concerns about how it might be applied, it is a concept that is, I believe, going to make a significant change in the way our residential and commercial cores are developed. I think that, as stated, the goal of trying to achieve a degree of predictability on the part of land planning so that owners and developers can come in and feel confident that what they're going to propose will be, in fact, approved is critical. And the flexibility in mixed use allows property owners a degree of flexibility in their design to put in place things that they think are going to be economically viable, whereas in the past there was a significant restriction given the past definitions. I think also I wanted to bring up a point that was discussed, 2 points. It was displayed on one of the graphs, a tiering of stories, and that's a concept on the forest side that I still think needs to be revisited in terms of heights. There is an acknowledged offense if a building is 3 stories high right up on the roadway. But the contrary to that is it's a visual appealing architecture if you can tier back non-lakefront properties so that they can present balconies and opportunities for view corridors from across the street at a higher height that adds significant economic value to the property and yet don't represent violations of view corridors, et cetera. Part of, in fact, our property on the lakefront that was rebuilt from 1995 to 2001 was used as an example of how things can be removed. We had a building in the middle of our 3-acre parcel on the lake that was the original main residence. We removed that completely to open up the center view corridor of our lakefront parcel and shifted the building to the left and the right, creating tiers of buildings that all have views of the lake, but at the same time opening up a significant view corridor for all visitors on the roadside. Those are the concepts that can be applied on the non-roadside as well. So I think there's still work to do, but we've made significant progress. And one other point, and it was mentioned earlier, I still think Commissioner Gray mentioned the point about 2 stories tiering down to 3 or 4. That was very clear in common speech, but we also significantly debated that same concept on some of the roadside lakefront property in Tahoe Vista that is actually, the road is elevated. If you think of places like the Holiday House and the Marina, it steps down 2 to 3 stories. And so from the roadside, we debated you could have a very small foot visual height, but the value or the benefit would be to allow tiering down and have on the lakefront potentially greater stories. Those are some of the nuances that we've discussed and debated, and I think I saw some of those concepts embraced, but there's still things I think we need to refine and improve on because there's significant opportunities in some of those parcels for that type of flexibility. So thank you, and thank you, staff.
Excuse me, would you mind signing?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Next, please.
Morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the Commission, staff, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Steve Teixeira, for the record, and my company is Sustainable Community Advocates, and we do what we say. We advocate for things that help sustain communities. I wanted to make a couple of brief comments and respond to some of the things that you've heard and brought up today. This is a comprehensive planning effort, as Ms. Navarro said from TRPA. Other jurisdictions are bringing in specific area plans. Placer County wants to consolidate all its existing plans. I think that's a great opportunity. It does involve quite a larger area. And this is an opportunity to fix some of the things that have happened in the past. Mr. Sevison's example of the Tahoe City Golf Course property. Some folks would tell you that, it's going to take a lot of analysis, a lot of time. It's got to take this amendment and that amendment. But this is the opportunity to fix those things and to move forward correctly in the future. Of course, the Tahoe City Golf Course is part of Tahoe City. It's not recognized that way with the plans the way they are. So it would be a tremendous missed opportunity if we went through this process without resolving things like that. So again, don't be intimidated by, it's going to take forever, a lot of analysis, all these plan amendments. That's what a planning process does. A couple of specific comments. SEZ restoration. We talk about SEZ sometimes of the way that they're sort of sacrosanct. We don't really do anything on them, or we shouldn't. We should tiptoe when we are there. And the only thing we do is make sure that nothing happens there, or we restore something that did happen there. I believe there's other opportunities with SEZ restoration. You can, from a soils perspective and hydrologically speaking, make an SEZ better by improving its ability to handle floods and to basically uptake nutrients and the kinds of things that SEZs do. So I believe there should be incentives, and this was a comment that I submitted to the county, there should be incentives for property owners that sort of super restore SEZ property. So I think that's an opportunity we should pursue, and we're making the same case to TRPA because they need to recognize that as well, incentives for those things. There's been no mention today of the SR 89 project, which is a very major project in Tahoe City. the proposal to realign the Highway 89 on the 64-acre property in parts of Tahoe City. And so that is a big part of town. And I think that the Tahoe City plan should more actively incorporate that. We're going into the environmental process. A preferred alternative hasn't yet been selected, but there should be more mention, and certainly at some point in time this commission may want to get a presentation on that project. And it's been funded, so it's not like it's way off in the future. I think you should use more meetings of the TAC. The TAC is your Technical Advisory Committee. They represent people from agencies that are your implementation partners for the planning that's going to be approved. And so I personally think there ought to be more meetings with the TAC involved, not just have them wait to review documents once they're drafted. Your staff has done a tremendous job on this. Crystal and her team have really, really worked hard. And so have people in the community, the plan team members and others who have been very involved in this. And so I know from talking to many of them that there's this pent-up desire to begin to get feedback. When folks submit comments to the county, you'd like to get some feedback and some interaction going, again, without having to wait till the documents are in draft form to do that. Whether that's one-on-one with groups or with people at a town hall or maybe a workshop setting, I think that would be good. So I'm giving you input. Does any of that make any sense to you? What do you plan to do about that as you draft the documents? And finally, just to think forward on the timeline that Crystal showed, it was very good, all the steps, but the TRPA was sort of listed on one line. There are actually 3 steps to the TRPA process, and I think that's something that we should all be aware of going forward. There's the Regional Plan Implementation Committee part of the process, and you're fortunate in having Mr. Sevison being a member of that group. That's a board committee that was set up, and the process now is that area plans or the kinds of plans you're doing here come to that committee first, and then once they get endorsed by that committee, they go to the Advisory Planning Commission, so that's the second stop, which is technical people. The county is represented on that as well, and then on to the governing board for the final. And that's, of course, after this commission and the Board of Supervisors have acted. But I just wanted to point out there are 3 steps now in the TRPA process. So thank you again for all your efforts and the efforts of your staff, and we will look forward to continuing to be very involved in the process. Thank you. Yes, thank you, sir.
Thank you. Next, please. Don't all rush.
Getting close to lunchtime.
Okay, well, seeing nobody else coming forward, we'll go ahead and close the public comment part of this presentation.
I'd like to just make one comment on all. First of all, I appreciate the public coming out and talking one-on-one with us here, so we can not only read our report but get some sense of the community. Because you have a lot of committees out there, but most of us aren't on the committee, except for maybe Mr. Sevison. But I do think the one point that was made today, this was troubling me too, this business with heights and stories. I mean, one gentleman here said that if you have a certain height, if we're trying to maintain our views and stuff, if that's the main thing for height, you could have 18 stories in there. What's the difference? Unless it's some other fire code, issue. But it seems to be confusing with those charts up there. What we really want to accomplish? Do we need both of them in there, a story and a height? Is there a reason to have 2 designations or just one?
Staff had, we're looking at a proposal for height in feet as measured by the feet and not the stories. So the story concept was a visioning concept that we used through the workshop process. Some teams chose to refine that a little bit more and take an approach that was based on the feet. Typically speaking, in a commercial structure, you had 12 feet per story is what you see, and then add in the roof. And then in residential, it would be 10. So that was what was discussed through the visioning process. But like I said, some teams chose to take it further and to look at the feet. Through this process, we will be using feet and not necessarily stories. In the TRPA regional plan for the town centers, it's 56 feet and 4 stories. So 5 stories is not permitted. Like the diagram had showed, it's the 4 stories with the roof pitch would bring you to 56 feet.
Well, I think the designation stories does give a person, even if you not looking at a picture, kind of a visual. Oh yeah, it's 2 stories, so I think from that perspective, the word story is a good thing to use maybe in the final document. But I guess the final document should be Steve. I mean, that's just my comment.
Mhm.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Simpson.
Two things. The one thing that's always baffled the public for years and years and continues to is that, if you talk about stories or height, do you want all your buildings to be like this building, just a flat top building, or do you want relief? Do you want pitches and shake roofs and all those kinds of things that add to the aesthetics of a building? And to blend the two of those is a little bit tricky, and it's kind of hard to do. And I got to tell you that before this is all over, I hope we have that resolved, because I think it's critical to having a good-looking community product as the result of it. So we need to find some tool or some agreement on how that's going to be interpreted, how it's going to be done, because stories and feet don't speak to it adequately. And so it's going to be a difficult way to find our way through, because everybody has their own ideas and everybody thinks there's some scam going on here, and people are using it to their advantage. Well, I don't know, but I do think that we do, if we're going to have a good-looking community as a result of all this effort, we need to find a way to make it work. And that's my comment at this point. I'm sure we'll deal with this for weeks and weeks yet, but I think it's a pretty difficult, tricky item. I had another item. What was it? Remind me.
You didn't give us your notes, so why don't you look at your notes? You have some notes in front of you there.
Well, I wanted to point out, we talked about different transportation elements, and one of the ones that I've been kind of keen on since the beginning of time was Waterborne Transit. And we kind of didn't talk about it much today, but the conservancy that I serve on, we've been planning and working not at breakneck speed, but we've been trying to get the plans and the approval for a major pier facility here that would incorporate Waterborne Transit along with, and so if we could do it with several stops, including Tahoe City and others, Homewood, I think it would be a tremendous experience for the people of the lake to share in. I mean, you can have lunch on it, you can take your bike, you can do a world of things, and I think that's going to be a major component that needs to be calculated into our walkways and our discussions of each community, because it can and should be a link in the future that's going to be complementary to the lake, I guess. My other question goes back to Alex's comment about some of these planting lines transitioning across property lines. How is that going to be? How is that being dealt with in our proposals now? In other words, I know they have, I think you have 15 acres or some large parcel that goes clear back, and yet the boundary line for the development and the height limitations and all that it goes right across the, maybe, I don't know, it looks like maybe 2/3 of it's in and 1/3 of it's out, something, I don't know, just looking at it. Is there any thought on how to make that work?
Typically, zoning lines would follow parcel lines. That's the way we like to do it. There are some instances in the county where that doesn't always happen, where you might have, a piece of property that straddles 2 or 3 even zone districts. And so as part of the visioning process that Alex is referring to with the team, they looked at what was existing in the commercial core, so the commercially zoned properties. And so staff is looking at the properties around the commercial cores from a land use perspective, but I don't think there's any intention of expansion of those commercial cores outside of the town centers. So the focus has been on looking at areas in the town centers, where there may be some appropriate places for expansion, but not necessarily the commercial centers within, Tahoe Vista, Carnelian Bay, places like that. I don't know that would necessarily be supported through the process.
Okay.
Well,
So-
I can ask that same question again. If the development line crosses the property line, how do they handle it?
It would be a
Only
split,
develop up to
the
that
property would be a split district, so.
You could have 4
Right.
stories in front and 2 stories in back.
Okay, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, or intensity, like in terms of like the densities that would be allowed, it would be different in a commercial, and the uses, the allowed uses. If you have a mixed-use commercial district, would allow for commercial uses on that side, but then on the other side, it's residential. And so that's something that we deal with, if the project came in, it would be a case-by-case, basic in terms of how you design the site. But this is it happens from time to time on various parcels in the county. Again, we don't like that. We try to, draw the zone districts along property lines, but that doesn't always occur.
You guys are really lucky. I thought of my other item.
We'll determine that after you bring it up.
Something that it always is an issue as we go through these types of planning processes. The comments that are made by the public, various people, almost seem like they get lost sometimes. And I want to be sure that doesn't happen here. I think it would be helpful if we had a shopping list of comments that people make and how and maybe responded to by staff, so that we could, near the end of the process, go back and look at those comments ourselves and determine, in fact, are they something we want to speak to, or are they something that just shouldn't be considered? Because I think people begin to think they're lost in the process. They make a comment and they're never heard of again, So I think it would be helpful if we just had a shopping list of comments that are made, and then when we get near the end, we can go back and discuss and cuss and stuff what the best solution is and why. And so people at least feel like they got resolution.
Mm-hmm.
Aren't you glad I got that out?
That was okay. I'm okay with that comment. Well, we did kind of get some of that. I'm looking at a Greater Tahoe City Planning Team meeting notes of 10/21, which is just the other day, I guess. That's why we got it here at the end. But it doesn't respond, I guess, to point by point question, but it does have the notes of the meeting, which kind of addresses what Larry was just referring to a little bit, at least.
Right, all team meetings were provided as an attachment in your report, and then in addition, there was a big packet of correspondence that we've received to date too. We didn't include the correspondence that we had received to date of your last meeting, but from the last meeting till now, the packet will just get bigger,
But
a lot of correspondence.
we don't want the packet, we want a synopsis of how many.
A summary is what I.
This was our problem, and 21 people said this was the problem, something like that.
A summary.
And how was it addressed? Are 3 people talking to us or 300 people talking to us?
We can summarize this meeting, and then at the next meeting that we have with you, provide that in the report.
Okay. I have one.
Crystal,
I have one
the,
question. And this is just in the general information. It was spoken of earlier by several people of trying to encourage or influence or development incentives. What incentives does the county, or can the county actually provide to say we'd rather you redevelop as opposed to develop new? What's our procedure?
Well, the incentives that we use today are the incentives through the regional plan, what is allowed through the regional plan. In terms of the incentives that we're looking at for redevelopment, I think through this process, what we're focusing on is removal of barriers related to the permit process. So, and using that as an incentive to get folks to come in and redevelop. So the idea is that you create a permitting process that is streamlined or easier to get through. Maybe you remove some of those requirements for use permits. If somebody comes in with a really tight design that is, meets the expectations that are set forth in the design standards. So in terms of providing for incentives through the community plan process, it would be that. But the other incentives in terms of transferring development into the town center, those things we point to the regional plan for those.
And so what does the regional plan give as an incentive for somebody to come in and do this rather than that? I mean, what's this incentive part?
You get higher, and Shay can get up and speak to this, but there's incentives to retire development outside of town centers and to concentrate, bring that development into town centers as a receiving site.
Yeah, so Shay Navarro for the record. The different incentives that we offer because town centers are areas that we want to direct development towards, to create walkable mixed-use centers and reduce automobile dependency. So we have to provide that capacity, and that's why we increased height allowances for these areas. There's increased coverage allowances for developed properties on high capability land. And basically, if the coverage, it has to be transferred in from somewhere else. So you can increase the concentration of coverage in the town centers, but you're overall probably reducing it. And if that development from sensitive land or from outlying areas, then we provide an incentive to the development rights or the development. So the residential units or CFA or TAUs, if it's from a sensitive area, then you can get, and you transfer it, tear it down and restore it and transfer it to a town center, you can get like 3-to-1 ratio. So you could go up in height and so that's why we created the additional height allowances to provide that capacity. And that's really our vision with the regional plan, have these greater intense areas of development where people can get out of their cars and walk. A lot of the development that occurred in Tahoe happened before TRPA existed on low-lying sensitive areas, and so the regional plan with these incentives is really trying to target existing development in sensitive lands and leverage private investment, because we're not going to be getting as much public funding to do type restoration. And we already have transfer allowances. We have an existing transfer program from the 1987 plan, and this is really looking at accelerating that so we can truly get that development out of sensitive areas. Do you guys have any other questions on that?
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah. I guess back to the team meetings, the technical team meetings, I guess one question is, are they open? And then are their minutes also included in the document?
They're not public meetings, and no, the minutes are, we do take notes and from the meetings. We haven't had a lot because they have reviewed our existing conditions report that is out. The purpose of the technical advisory committee is to provide feedback on the technical aspects of the plan, so of the documents, so the development standards, the zoning that will go in those area plans and the design guidelines. And so those haven't actually been, that's what we're drafting now. So as those take shape, that's when we'll meet with the TAC. And so no, they're not public meetings. It's all regulatory agencies, folks that actually have a regulatory stake in the process. And so we want to make sure that whatever it is that we're developing has been reviewed by them for technical accuracy.
Okay, I guess what I'm kind of questioning is a lot of the comments, particularly with the Tahoe City area, that came up today were jurisdictional coordination. In the case of the golf course, the PUD is ultimately going to sit down and talk about the zoning and whether or not it should be in, and the U.S. Forest Service is going to do the same. And so I guess I'm just kind of questioning is, if that confusion is out there and becoming a major issue in the process, how do you get the communications from the technical team to the public so that they know that the coordination is going on and know how the process is developed in those particular areas?
Yeah, we could, minutes from the TAC, we could provide, they would be online. Everything that we've done has been available online, meeting notes.
So there are many.
Although the TAC meeting notes, I don't think we have included those online, but that's certainly something that we could do. It's more where we provide a document to the TAC ahead of time that they review, provide comment on, and then we meet to review the comments on the document. And so any comments that we receive on the documents, we could certainly provide those online for the public to review.
Okay, and maybe just a discussion about process discussion somewhere in the documents where the public can get a hold of it so that they understand how the process is occurring and how they might influence it, because they might influence through another jurisdiction, and it wouldn't really necessarily be the county's ultimate responsibility to make a determination. It's just discussion that's going on, but the actual agency that is, managing that particular land would be the one ultimately that has to make an agreement. So if somebody's
Right.
having a problem, if they're aware of that, then they could talk with that agency to
Mhm.
find out what their plans are and what the implications are and that kind of stuff.
So do we have a consensus to direct staff in that direction?
Well, it's just that's a comment suggestion. I don't know if we have to make a vote on it.
Well, I think that's good. I think by
Okay.
by putting those minutes or online or getting them out from the TAC, it will at least let the public know that you're actually going to attack it, or letting that there are technical people looking at these codes and stuff like that. And I'm sure they well, maybe not sure that one of the comments was kind of doubting if the TAC was involved, but you've already kind of answered that right
Yeah,
now, that they aren't quite yet because you haven't got your part done quite yet.
Except that they were involved in the existing conditions. So when we put that together, we needed to know, were these existing conditions that are in the report accurate? And so they did review that.
Okay, good.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions?
I have a quick question of our illustrious county council, if I could. Now, we just went through the agony of having the state of California take away our redevelopment projects, money, and the whole thing. Is there any other tools that are available that could recreate that in any way? And then, of course, I know that is the board interested in doing that, but firstly, the redevelopment thing was such an important ingredient in the regional plan update and all that, and then to have that rug pulled out from under us, I would really like to see some tools developed, if they're at all possible, even if it's only on a jurisdictional basis in Placer County or whatever, that would afford some suited projects the opportunity to use that process in some fashion, because it could make a world of difference in how well this new process is implemented.
Right. I know the state legislature, there's a few bills in process right now, I don't know the status, where they're trying to revive a type of redevelopment. So far, nothing has passed. Right now, the county is involved with the wind-down process that's required, which means we're dispersing all assets of the former redevelopment agency. So at this point, there is nothing really from the board direction or county-wide that's happened, but I suspect there will be as time goes on. I think most jurisdictions, from what I've heard, are still reeling from the dissolution and having to deal with that whole process, which is incredibly cumbersome, time-consuming. And I think until that process really winds down, you won't see much on a global scale. There are aspects in planning that have always been there that do, in a certain way, incentivize redevelopment. The housing element has aspects and policies, and you just went through the housing element of redeveloping areas to improve them. So you see the little stuff, but the big stuff, probably not for a while. Maybe the next legislative session will produce something from redevelopment that'll help. Right now, I know every department grasps at any grant monies that might be coming their way to fill that gap, but it's clearly a gap that is being felt by this county and most counties in this area.
Thank you. In that case, I'm going to bring this meeting to a close. Thank you all for attending. Thank you for stepping.